Okay, so now we're going to take our circles and we're going to turn them into spheres by adding value. So I want to talk about light source. Wherever your light source is, your shadow is going to fall on the opposite side. So if you look at this circle, your light source is here, and then your shadow is on the opposite side. So your light source is on the left, your shadow is on the right. And then there's also a shadow on your sphere itself to make it appear more round. Because remember, we're turning these flat shapes into spheres, okay? So we want them to look round in 3D. Okay, so if you don't have a compass, you're gonna need something to trace to get your circles. So I used a candle, just a little tea light, and I traced it 6 times. And when I did that, I spaced them out because you have to do your shadows, so you don't want them to be too close to each other, okay? So we're gonna do 6 circles and we're gonna turn them into 6 spheres, and we're gonna have our light source on different sides. So the first one, you'll have your light source on the left, and when you do that, the shadow is to the right. The middle one, the light source is behind, so the shadow is in front. And this one, the light source is on the right, so your shadow is going to be on the left. Okay, so let's get started. So this one, your light source is going to be underneath. Okay, so when your light source is underneath, your shadow is going to be up top. Okay, so this could be like on a ceiling or on a wall behind your object. Okay, so when you shade this in, your shadow is going to be darker than the shadow here that's not on your circle is going to be darker than any shadow that's on your circle. Okay, so you're going to darken the cast, this is called the cast shadow in, but then there's also a shadow on your sphere. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So if I had ortolin, then I would use that to blend, but I'm just gonna blend it with my finger a little bit, okay? And then if I have any excess outside the shadow, I can just erase it. Okay, so here's my light source. So then my shadow on my object is gonna be opposite too. So I'm just gonna do like a light shadow inside, and then I'm going to blend it. And when I do my shadow, I'm doing like curved lines because I want it to look round, okay? And then if you erased your highlight, you can, or excuse me, if you covered up your highlight, you can just use an eraser and then you can erase a highlight. Okay, so I've got my cast shadow. So cast shadow, and then the shadow on my object, and then I've got my highlight. Okay, that's that white area right here. So I'm not going to draw a line because I don't want to ruin my drawing, okay? But that is the highlight. And then here, where your object and shadow meet, this part is very dark. So you want to try to make that the darkest part of your cast shadow. Now, if you want to do this with hatching or cross hatching, that's fine. I just find it easier to do with pencil. But if you really like pen, you can do it in pen if you want. Okay, so there's that one. So I've got to the left, behind, to the right, below. So now I'm going to do above. So if it kind of looks like behind. Okay, so if my shadow is above, if my light source is above, then my shadow is going to be below, okay? So actually, when my light source is above, my shadow will be a little bit smaller than my shadow for behind. Okay. So I'm just going to darken this in. So this is my cast shadow because it's not on the object, right? And then the darkest part of the cast shadow is where your object and shadow touch. So I'm just going to darken that area up just like that, okay? And then I'm going to make my shadow on my sphere, and in this case, you're going to see the highlight. So you don't really see the highlight when it's behind because the highlight is going to be in the front, and we don't see that. But here you will because it's above, okay? So I'm just going to blend this with my finger, and then I'm just going to erase a little highlight. Let's say it's like right there. Okay, so I've got my cast shadow. And then the shadow on my sphere. And then I've got my highlight. Okay, so each sphere should have a cast shadow, a shadow on the object, and a highlight, except for the one you have where it's behind, because you won't see because it's behind the object. So the highlight would also be behind the object. Okay, and now this one is fairly easy. So this one is if your light is in front, okay? So you're not really going to see the light source because it's in front. So you can just write in front, okay? And so in this case, you won't see the shadow because the shadow is behind. So you can just write shadow is behind. Okay, so if it's in front, you can do a little shadow around the object. And then you can do a lot more highlight in the center. So then I would do it like this. Okay, so if your light source is in front, the shadow is behind, so you won't see it. So you don't have to draw that one. Okay, so this is if the light source is to the left. This is if the light source is behind. So you can write left, behind, to the right. Okay, below, and this one is above. And then the last one is front. Okay, so here are your 6 spheres with a light source and a shadow on the object, a cast shadow, and a highlight.